Good Sunday morning, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to another Southern Oregon Weather Weekend Update. We'll start with a recap of the temperatures over the first couple weeks of this month. We'll talk about our smoke situation over the next few days. We'll discuss the rest of the week, and then I'll conclude with an update about the latest ideas for September. So first, you can see the first 2 weeks of the month were a little bit cooler than average along the west coast, especially over northern Oregon, but for our area, a little cooler than normal. However, the last 7 days, have been quite a bit warmer than normal. And this lines up really well with what the MJO has been doing. You can see at the beginning of the month, the MJO was in phases 3, 4, and 5, and those are cooler than normal phases for our area. But lately, it's been hanging around in phase 8, and that's a significantly warmer than normal phase. And remember, the MJO is just areas of convection, thunderstorms moving across the Indian Ocean, going from Africa, heading toward Australia, and then moving out into the Pacific Ocean. And believe it or not, that influences our weather here on the west coast of the United States. So what we've seen happen with temperatures in August lines up very nicely with what the MJO has been doing. Now let's talk about our smoke over the next day or so. It's gotten hazy here in the Rogue Valley because of southwest flow. We're right on the border between clear skies to our north and west and heavy smoke to our south and east. And that southwest flow really puts us right in between those two areas. Now, if this flow can turn a little bit more westerly or northwesterly, then this haze will clear out. And I think there's a good chance that that will happen. Here you can see by tomorrow afternoon, we start getting some clearing. And that's because of our 500 millibar pattern here. You can see the current situation with this ridge. You can see the southwest flow coming over the top of that ridge. But you can see this ridge gets shifted farther to the east as a weak trough pushes in. It splits. Piece of energy goes south, piece goes north. But it's enough to turn the flow a little more westerly for a time and maybe even northwesterly for a time. And that could help clear out some of the haze in the next day or so. Now, let's talk about our teleconnections. One of the reasons why we're going to see that cold front and then possibly another weak cold front on its heels is because we had this big rise in the Southern Oscillation Index. Again, another acronym here that stands for Southern Oscillation Index, the SOI. That is basically the difference between pressure at Tahiti and Darwin, Australia. So it's a way to gauge how strong the trade winds are, the easterly trade winds, or whether there's a westerly wind burst going on. Basically a way to judge whether there's a La Nina type atmospheric pattern or an El Nino type atmospheric pattern. So positive SOI is associated with stronger easterlies. It's more of a La Nina type pattern, and that's a cooler signal for our part of the country. Now there's a lag, as we've talked about before, of about 2.5 weeks. So this spike happened in the early part of the month, and it's just taking effect right around now, here at the end of August. So it makes sense that we would see a couple cold fronts try to push in over the next few days and give us some relief from that smoke and cool temperatures down a little bit. Another reason why we could see a brief respite from the smoke and some cooler temperatures midweek is the MJO. So here we have been in phase 8. Yes, that's a very warm phase, but you can see we're moving into phase 1. And that's a cooler phase for Southern Oregon and Northern California. As the MJO continues to rotate into phase 2, that is a slightly warmer signal. And so we could see a few cooler days midweek, and then late week we could see another day or two of heat. However, I don't think that's going to last for very long, and we'll talk about why in just a moment. Here you can see the potential for that late week heat. Again, I think it's just going to be a day or two, but this ridge is going to build back over the area late week, maybe Friday and Saturday. So here's all that information in the Weather Channel's 10-day forecast. I actually think midweek it's going to be a little bit cooler than this because of those cold fronts that are going to push through. There's a suggestion here. The Weather Channel algorithm does see this. Monday is calling for mostly cloudy conditions. But I think we could see low 90s on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday as well. Friday, yes, I think it could get warmer late week because of the MJO progressing into phase 2. However, cooler temperatures Saturday and Sunday and Monday are likely because that MJO is going to keep moving through phase 2 into phases 3 and 4. And guess what? Those are cooler phases, just like we saw at the beginning of the month. And here the European Ensemble is pushing a pretty strong trough into the northern Rockies. And we're going to catch the trailing edge of that. And that's going to give us cooler temperatures for sure, and northwest flow, which is definitely going to push the smoke to the south and east of us. Here you can see the last 3 runs on the European Ensemble, and actually the idea here is shifting toward a stronger trough. So it's a pretty sure bet that very late month, and as the calendar flips to September, that we could see a pretty healthy shot of cool air. And again, that lines up really well with the MJO. Phases 3 and 4 are cooler phases. Here you can see the correlation for the end of August going into September. Phase 3 is kind of a transitional phase between warmth in phase 2 and cooler weather in phase 4. But the direction is a cooler direction versus a warmer one. You can see the CFS MJO forecast agrees with this. And it actually wants to keep the MJO progressing toward phases 3 and 4 well into the month of September. Here phase 4 is roughly around 120 east. Phase 3 is closer to 90 east. Then phase 1 here is maybe right around 50 east. That's where we are currently. But you can see even in September, getting later into the month, phase 4 is still a cool phase. So this is why I think overall the month of September could be a cooler than normal month. On the whole, yes, we could have some warmer times as the MJO moves through phase 3, which again is kind of a transitional phase, but I think overall it's going to be cooler than normal month because the Southern Oscillation Index too had a big rise a couple days ago. We're seeing those cold fronts from that rise at the beginning of August. Now it's rising again late in the month, and so if we flip forward 18 days, that should take effect right around the end of the first week of September. So that's a cool signal to start September. Also, we've talked about our analogs, 2005 and 2016, how they're showing a cooler than normal signal for September. And if we look at climatology, so what's happened recently over the last 10 years, we've seen that Septembers on average have been cooler than normal. So these are all reasons to believe that September is not going to be a much warmer than average month. If anything, it could turn out to be a little bit cooler than normal. However, and we do have to take this into account as well, for some reason the models, including the CFSV2 and the JMA, the Japanese weeklies, are showing a pretty warm September. They want to blowtorch September over our part of the country and really build this ridge in. And I just don't see a lot of evidence for a sustained ridge. You know, it could mean that the pattern is displaced to the east a little bit, so instead of having this ridge north of Hawaii, we have it closer to the west coast, and that is a possibility. But I still think we could see shots of cooler air from troughs riding over the top of that ridge and dropping into the northern Rockies and the northern plains. I just don't see evidence that this ridge is going to be parked over the Pacific Northwest for most of the month of September, like the CFSV2 wants to show. And I think one of the reasons why the CFSV2 is going for this scenario is that once again it's trying to turn the atmospheric angular momentum positive. Again, a negative angular momentum is kind of a La Nina type pattern. It's a cooler pattern for our part of the country. a positive angular momentum is a warmer pattern for our part of the country. And we saw this in July. The angular momentum was negative and models kept trying to take it positive, but kept delaying the rise over and over and over again. And I think the same situation is going on. I think the CFSV2 is too fast to turn this positive. So let's recap all of that information. Over the next 7 days, we do see some improvement in the smoke tomorrow as flow shifts to the west just a little bit more rather than southwest. We have those weak cold fronts coming in midweek. That's thanks to the SOI. From 18 days ago, we saw that big rise. So that correlates well with some cold fronts and a nice cooler shot of air midweek. We will see some warmer days late week, I think, as the MJO moves into phase 2, which is a warmer phase. However, cooler weather and northwest flow are likely to start early next week as the MJO transitions toward phase 4, which is definitely a cooler than normal phase. And that should really help to clear the smoke out of our area, unless a fire starts directly to the northwest of us. If that happens, then obviously that's a different situation. But as long as the fires remain to the south and east, northwest flow will bring us some clean air. For September, we do have multiple signals pointing toward cooler than normal conditions. Our analogs, climatology, so what's happened recently over the last decade, our MJO, the Southern Oscillation Index, all of these signals are cooler signals, but some models are showing a different scenario and showing significant warmth. And in the case of the CFSV2, I think that's because they're trying to take the angular momentum positive too soon. So we'll just have to see how this plays out. Sometimes the models win, but in this case, I think there's pretty strong evidence that September as a whole will be cooler than normal, and I think the models will have to cave at some point. So guys, thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to set your notifications for that next weekend update, and please leave a like if you enjoyed the forecast.